What is it that lives in the body that history never spoke about out loud? That's the question we carry into every episode. Hello, my soul family. I am Afi G. Come right in. Welcome back to I Am Afi G, What We Carry. If you've been with me through the first two episodes, thank you for walking this far. And if this is your first time here, you are right on time. There is space for you in this conversation. That is actually exactly what today's episode is about. I want to begin today by speaking directly to someone. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's someone you love. There is a person listening right now who has heard me talk about ancestral healing, about lineage, about Egun, which is how we call the ancestors in Yoruba, about the ones who came before us. And somewhere inside, they've felt a quiet ache, a sense of being on the outside of it. Because when they reach back toward their ancestry, they don't find names. They find a wall. Maybe you were adopted, and the bloodline behind you is a sealed record. Maybe your family scattered, and the stories were never passed down. Maybe you are a descendant of enslaved people, and the names, the languages, the origins were deliberately, violently erased. Maybe there was just silence, the kind of silence where the old folks never talked. And then one day they were gone, and the stories went with them. And so you've wondered, how can I do this work? How can I really do this thing called ancestral healing work? How can I honor the memory of my ancestors when I don't even know their names? Well, my soul family, today I'm going to offer you something that I hope changes that question entirely. So hear me out. Lineage is not the same as genealogy. And once you understand the difference, you will realize you were never standing outside the door. You have been inside the house the entire time. Let's get started. Let me make this distinction as clear as I possibly can, because it is the foundation of everything else. Genealogy is information. It is names, dates, documents, the famous family tree so many of us love to create. Genealogy is the record, the ship manifest, the birth certificate, the DNA test results. Genealogy is the archive. Lineage, on the other hand, is something else entirely different. Lineage is what I like to refer to as transmission. It is the living thread of inheritance that moves through your blood, your body, your patterns, your gifts, your fears, whether or not a single word was ever written down. Genealogy is the map. Lineage is the river. You can possess an entire map and never once touch the water. And you can be carried by the river your whole life without ever having seen the map. Do you hear me now? Think about what this means. A person can have a complete, documented family tree going back 10 generations. every name, every date, and still know nothing about the emotional inheritance flowing through the bloodline. They have the map. They've never felt the river. And the reverse is just as true. A person can know almost none of the names, can have nothing but dead ends and sealed records, and still be profoundly, intimately connected to the currents moving through their lineage. No map, but they are standing waist deep in the river. Because here's the truth that history cannot touch. Are you ready for this? Relationship does not begin with information. Hear me out. Relationship begins with acknowledgement. If ancestral healing required perfect records, then history would have what? Would have permanently won. Every act of erasure, every burned record, every renamed child, every broken language, every unmarked grave would have succeeded in cutting us off from our own souls forever. But hello, spirit has always been larger than the archive. The ancestors existed before the paperwork, and they continue to exist far beyond it, right? I want to share with you a way of understanding this that the spiritual traditions of our peoples have carried for a very long time. Long before the archive, long before the record, because these traditions have always known something that history forgot. Consider, for example, the Afro-Diasporic spiritual traditions, the ancestral practices that survived the Middle Passage and took root across Cuba, across the Caribbean, across the Americas. In many of these traditions, an unnamed ancestor is not understood as absent simply because their name was taken from them. A name is powerful. I'm not saying it's not. I want to be very clear about that. A name gives direction. A name gives the spirit a particular door through which we can call them, salute them, remember them. A name matters. But the spirit is not created by name. The spirit existed before the name, before the record, before the ship manifest, before the plantation ledger. It existed before the silence. In African traditions, Nigerian specifically, Yoruba specifically, there is often a sacred space, an ancestral altar, where the dead are honored. And the understanding is that the unnamed ones are present there, present through blood, present through bone, through pattern, through ache, through survival intelligence. They are present in the things our families repeat without knowing where they began. For example, they are present in fears that feel older than one lifetime. They are present in gifts that no one taught us, but somehow we carry. They are present in the body before they are ever present in language. Slavery tried to erase names, did it not? But it could not erase consequence. It could not erase spiritual continuity. It could not erase the fact that someone survived long enough for you to be here. You are the evidence that they existed. So, on that ancestral altar, the glass of water is not only for the ancestors whose names can be spoken, it is also for the ones history made anonymous. The candle is for the ones who were never given a grave marker. The prayer is for the ones whose stories were swallowed by violence, by migration, by shame, by silence. And in many of these same traditions, there is a very direct understanding that spirit is not sentimental. Spirit is force. Spirit is nature. Spirit is memory in motion. So the unnamed dead are not lost relatives floating in some abstraction. They are part of the spiritual current that moves through land, through blood, through breath, through a destiny. Let me offer you the distinction that I believe can change everything for you. The unnamed ancestors are not missing. They are unrecorded. I'm going to say it again because I really want this to land. The unnamed ancestors are not missing. They are unrecorded. And those are two very different things. They may be unknown to the archive, but they are not unknown to the blood. They may be unknown to the tongue, but they are not unknown to the spirit. And I want to be careful here. The work is not to invent them, not to romanticize them, not to pretend we know what we don't know. The work is to make room for them with humility, to say, those whose names were taken, those whose languages were broken, those whose children were scattered, those whose stories were buried, you are not forgotten here. Because sometimes the ancestor does not arrive with a name. Sometimes the ancestor arrives as a pattern asking to be healed. Sometimes they arrive as a strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes they arrive as grief with no clear origin. Sometimes they arrive as a calling. And when we answer that calling with reverence, we begin to restore dignity to what history tried to make invisible. Do you hear me? Let me tell you about someone I worked with some years ago. I've changed the details to protect her privacy, but the heart of this is true. This particular client had been adopted as an infant, and one of the deepest wounds she carried was the belief that she was spiritually disconnected from her ancestry. Not just emotionally disconnected, spiritually disconnected, cut off at the root. She would say things to me like, how can I honor ancestors I don't know? How can I do ancestral healing if I don't even know who my people are? And underneath those questions was a deeper fear. The fear that belonging required information. That because she lacked names, records, photographs, and stories, she somehow lacked access. She believed that she was disqualified. So one day, she brought a folder to our session. Years of genealogy research, DNA tests, adoption records, search requests, dead end after dead end after dead end. And I looked at her and I asked her a question that shifted the entire conversation. I asked, before you knew any of these names and everything else you're showing me, were you still breathing? She looked confused. So I gently asked again in a different kind of way. I asked her, before you knew any of these names, were you still dreaming, still loving, still carrying fears, still carrying gifts, still repeating certain patterns, still feeling called towards certain things? She looked at me a little puzzled and she said, Yes. So I said, then whatever produced those patterns was already reaching you long before you found a single name, long before you came in contact with any of these records you are showing me. Let me tell you, the way she went silent, you can hear a pin drop on the floor. The room went quiet because she suddenly realized she had been treating genealogy and lineage as though they were the same thing, and they are not. She had been searching the map while standing in the middle of the river. That realization changed everything for her. Her healing work stopped revolving around the question, who were they? And it started revolving around a different question entirely, which is, what are they still trying to teach me? Instead of searching only through archives, she began paying attention to her recurring dreams, her emotional patterns, her intuitive gifts, her family dynamics, the places in her life where the pain seemed older than her own biography. For the first time, she understood that ancestry is not only something you research, it is also something you experience. Are you listening? The breakthrough was not that she discovered who her ancestors were. The breakthrough was realizing she had never stopped being her ancestors simply because she didn't know their names. She was not standing outside the door trying to gain access. She had been inside the house the entire time. She just didn't realize it. Hear me out, my soul family. I want to be honest with you about my own lineage because I am not standing outside of this teaching. I live inside it too. I will say though, I feel I am fortunate. I feel I am fortunate. And I feel I'm fortunate because I know a great deal about my immediate ancestors or my immediate deceased loved ones. I know what they did. I know many of their talents. I know what they dedicated their lives to. But there are still parts that are lost to me because many of the old folks, they didn't talk. They were very private, deeply private. And so the stories that are missing for me are not the facts. It's the emotional life, how they felt, what hurt them, how they processed what they carried, what made them happy, what made them grieve, the interior world. So much of it went unspoken. So much of that interior world went unspoken. And then it went with them. But here's what I want you to hear. Even without those specific stories, I can still see the thread. I see it in how my mother is. I see it in how my father is. Their reservation, their sense of privacy that sometimes feels like it's too much, too guarded. The kind of privacy that unless you speak and ask for support, you could literally slowly die. And because I can recognize that I can recognize that some guardedness, that some of that same guardedness in myself, that same instinct toward overprotection, toward keeping the inner door closed, that recognition has become its own form of ancestral information for me. Do you hear me? I didn't need them to tell me how they felt. The pattern told me. The lineage told me what the tongue never did. And that gave me something to work with, something to heal. Heck, something I'm not even fully done working through, entirely at least. That is the river, even when the map is incomplete. The river is still moving through you, and you can learn to read it. Okay. So if you have carried the belief that this work was not for you, that you were disqualified by everything you don't know, I invite you to set that belief down today. You do not need every name to begin. You do not need a complete family tree. You do not need the archive to grant you permission. You need only the willingness to acknowledge what is already moving through you and to meet it with reverence. Here's the question I want you to carry into your week. And I want you to hold it lightly, with curiosity, not pressure. And the question is, what in me feels older than my own story? And what might it be trying to teach me? That question is a doorway. And you don't need anyone's name to walk through it, okay? It is my deep prayer today's conversation landed softly in you. And may you allow it to invite you into discovering more about yourself. Why? Because you deserve it. Because you deserve it. Lastly, the next special episode is already waiting for you. It's one I felt the need to share early with you versus waiting for 2 weeks. I believe many of you will identify with it, or at best, know someone who you feel needs to listen to it. So go take a listen. It is something that is so deep that I have encountered in so many sessions over the years with so many different clients. And I believe it will reach you. So, mi familia, if you want to go deeper into this work, in community, with others who are learning to read the river of their own lineage, the Shadow and Lineage Healing Circle is open for you. You'll find the link in the show notes and in my bio. It is a private space I built for exactly this. Okay, my soul family, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen and share this episode with someone who has believed they were locked out of their own ancestry. The adoptee, the estranged, the descendant of those whose names were taken. Let them know there is space for them in the house. There always was. You showed up. That matters more than you know. May what was spoken today find the place in you that has been waiting to receive it. May it travel down past the mind, into the body, into the marrow, where the lineage lives, where the unnamed ones still wait to be acknowledged. To those whose names were taken, we remember you anyway. I am Afi G, and this has been What We Carry. Ashe.